Larry Bird was never supposed to become the most feared man in basketball. He didn't look like a superhero. He didn't move like lightning. He didn't fly through the air like Michael Jordan or bulldoze defenders like Shaquille O'Neal. He looked like a tired factory worker who accidentally wandered into an NBA arena. But that was the illusion. Underneath that ordinary appearance was a basketball mind so ruthless, so calculating, and so psychologically violent that grown men, Hall of Famers, champions, enforcers, killers, walked onto the court already defeated before the game even started. This was not just greatness. This was warfare disguised as basketball. Long before the NBA exploded into a billion-dollar empire, before sneaker deals turned players into global icons, there was one rivalry that dragged the entire league out of darkness and forced the sports world to pay attention. Larry Bird versus Magic Johnson. And the terrifying part is that Magic himself admitted Bird got inside his head in ways nobody else ever could. Imagine being Magic Johnson, one of the most confident athletes to ever live, waking up every morning not thinking about your own stats, not thinking about your own team, but rushing to check Larry Bird's box score like your peace of mind depended on it. That's fear. That's obsession. That's the effect Bird had on the greatest players alive. Their rivalry started in college when the entire country became hypnotized by a battle that felt bigger than basketball itself. Magic was Hollywood before Hollywood fully embraced him. Charismatic, flashy, smiling, electric. Bird was the opposite. Cold, silent, emotionless. A farm kid from French Lick, Indiana, carrying a tiny school nobody respected onto the biggest stage in America. And somehow, despite losing that championship game, Bird walked away more dangerous than ever because Magic realized something horrifying that night. This man doesn't scare. That was the beginning of the nightmare. Once Bird entered the NBA, the league changed instantly. Boston had been broken, irrelevant, almost lifeless before he arrived. Then Bird stepped into the franchise and transformed them overnight into a monster. One rookie changed the identity of an entire city. Not through athleticism. Not through flashy dunks. Through intelligence so sharp it felt supernatural. Bird played basketball, like he could see the future unfolding seconds before everyone else. Defenders weren't reacting to his moves. They were reacting to traps he had already planted in their minds. That's what made him terrifying. He didn't beat your body first. He destroyed your confidence. Every possession became psychological torture. He'd stare directly into a defender's eyes and calmly explain exactly how he was about to embarrass them. Not maybe. Not possibly. Exactly. Then he'd walk to that exact spot, rise up with that awkward-looking jumper, and bury the shot while the entire arena exploded in disbelief. Imagine the humiliation. A man tells you his move beforehand. The entire crowd knows it's coming. Your teammates know it's coming. Your coaches know it's coming, and you still can't stop it. That's not basketball anymore. That's domination. Larry Bird turned elite athletes into spectators. He made all-stars feel helpless. The famous stories sound fake until you realize there are dozens of witnesses confirming every single one. He walked into the first ever three-point contest surrounded by the greatest shooters on earth and asked them one question that instantly shattered the room's confidence. Which one of y'all is finishing second? No Ismail. No joke. No performance. He meant it. Then he went out and won the contest without even taking off his warm-up jacket, raising his finger in victory before the final shot even dropped through the net, because in his mind the result had already happened long before anyone else realized it. That was Bird's aura. He operated with the certainty of a man reading a script nobody else had access to. Then came the legendary nights that transformed him from superstar into myth. The 60-point massacre against Atlanta wasn't just scoring. It was psychological terrorism. Bird was calling shots in real time, predicting exactly where the ball would go, where he would land, how defenders would fail, and then humiliating the Hawks over and over until even Atlanta's own bench players started celebrating his shots like fans instead of opponents. Think about how insane that is. Your enemy is destroying you so badly that your own teammates forget whose side they're on. Coaches were furious. Players were stunned. And Bird just kept smirking like the entire game bored him. Then he reached an even more disrespectful level. One night he decided scoring normally was too easy, so he announced he would play left-handed for almost an entire game simply because he was saving the right hand for the Lakers. Who does that? Who voluntarily handicaps themselves against NBA athletes and still drops a near 50-point triple-double? That wasn't confidence anymore. That was complete psychological ownership over the league. And the terrifying thing was nobody could argue with him, because he kept proving every word true. Even the toughest men alive cracked under Bird's pressure. The Detroit Pistons weren't just a basketball team. They were street fighters disguised in jerseys. Bill Laimbeer, Rick Mahorn, Dennis Rodman, Isiah Thomas. These were men who tried to physically break opponents. But Bird shattered them mentally. That's worse. Physical pain fades. Mental collapse stays with you forever. During the Eastern Conference Finals, Isiah Thomas made one terrified mistake against Bird. A soft, lazy inbound pass that Bird instantly stole before feeding Dennis Johnson for the game winner. 1 second of hesitation. 1 second of panic. That's all Bird needed. The same toughness that built Larry Bird slowly killed Larry Bird. By the time the Dream Team arrived, the body that once dominated the NBA was collapsing under unbearable pain. While Jordan and Magic dazzled crowds, Bird spent stretches lying flat on the floor behind the bench, because sitting in a chair hurt too much. Imagine how cruel that is. One of the greatest competitors ever trapped inside a body that could no longer carry his genius. Yet even broken, even damaged, even barely able to move, Bird still commanded respect from everyone around him because legends don't disappear when their bodies fail. Their presence survives. And somehow the rivalry that once felt like war transformed into one of the deepest brotherhoods sports has ever seen. For years Magic and Bird were enemies who carried the weight of the entire NBA on their shoulders. Celtics versus Lakers. Blue collar versus Hollywood. Grit versus glamour. But when Magic revealed he had HIV and the sports world reacted with fear and uncertainty, the first major call he received came from Larry Bird. Not cameras. Not publicity. Humanity. In that moment the rivalry disappeared, and two exhausted warriors finally understood what they meant to each other. Bird treated Magic like a brother when much of the world treated him like a headline. That single phone call became bigger than championships, bigger than MVPs, bigger than basketball itself. And years later, during Bird's jersey retirement ceremony, Magic stood there emotional, and told the world Larry Bird had only ever lied once, when he claimed someday there would be another Larry Bird. Because there never will be. There can't be. Basketball will produce more athletes, more scorers, more highlight reels, maybe even more champions. But it will never create another man who could mentally break an entire league while barely looking like he belonged in it. Larry Bird wasn't built like a superhero. He became something scarier. A man who proved intelligence, fearlessness, obsession, and killer instinct could overpower raw athleticism itself. He turned basketball into chess while everyone else was still playing checkers. He didn't just beat opponents. He exposed them. He made the greatest players alive question themselves. And decades later, that fear still echoes through NBA history because legends fade with time, but psychological dominance never dies. Larry Bird's greatest weapon was never his jumper, never his passing, never even his legendary trash talk. It was inevitability. The feeling that once the game entered winning time, once the pressure became unbearable, once the crowd got loud and hearts started racing, Larry Bird somehow became calmer while everyone else mentally drowned. That's what separated him from ordinary superstars. Most players rely on emotion to survive big moments. Bird operated like emotion didn't exist. Cold eyes. Slow walk. No panique. No wasted movement. Just execution. And that's why his opponents feared him more than they feared freak athletes who could dunk from the free throw line. Because against Bird, athletic gifts stopped mattering. Speed didn't matter. Vertical leap didn't matter. Strength didn't matter. He neutralized all of it with timing, positioning, anticipation, and cruelty disguised as confidence. The NBA in the 1980s was not a friendly league. It was violence. Hard fouls that sounded like car crashes. Benches ready to explode into fights. Defenders trying to intimidate scorers physically and mentally. Yet Bird walked directly into that war zone, and somehow became the smartest predator in the building every single night. That alone is almost impossible to comprehend. He wasn't protected by soft rules. He wasn't playing in an era built for scorers. Defenders could practically mug you and still get away with it. Yet Bird kept destroying teams anyway. Night after night, year after year. 3 straight MVPs, championships, game winners, clutch performances, entire playoff series controlled by his brain. Even players who hated him couldn't stop admiring him, because once you stepped onto the floor with Bird, you understood immediately that you were dealing with something different. Michael Cooper, one of the greatest defenders ever, admitted guarding Bird felt like trying to solve a puzzle that changed shape every second. You could play perfect defense for almost the entire possession, stay disciplined, avoid every fake, contest every movement, and Bird would still somehow discover one invisible angle nobody else saw. That's what shattered defenders psychologically. They weren't losing because of effort. They were losing because Bird processed the game faster than humanly possible. That chip on his shoulder never disappeared. Every insult became fuel. Every doubt became motivation. He carried himself like a man permanently offended by the world. And once he crossed the lines onto the court, all that anger transformed into cold-blooded execution. The media tried turning him into symbols and narratives, but Bird himself only cared about one thing: destroying whoever stood in front of him. That's why players couldn't mentally relax against him. He never took possessions off, never stopped probing for weaknesses, never stopped talking. Bird's trash talk wasn't random noise. It was psychological surgery. He studied personalities. He understood insecurities. He knew exactly when opponents were vulnerable. Against some players he'd stay silent until the final minutes, then suddenly start talking once pressure peaked. Against others he attacked from the opening tip, just to shake their confidence early. Every word had purpose. Every insult was strategic. And the worst part? He always backed it up. Xavier McDaniel once described Bird literally pointing to the exact spot on the floor where he planned to hit the game-winning shot. McDaniel defended it perfectly. Bird hit it anyway. Imagine how demoralizing that feels. You do everything right and still fail because the man across from you already calculated the outcome minutes earlier. That's why Bird's reputation became mythical. Stories spread around the league like ghost tales. Young players entered games already terrified because veterans warned them what Bird would do. And once fear enters competition, you're finished. Bird understood this better than anyone. He knew hesitation destroys athletes. 1 second of uncertainty changes footwork, timing, reactions, decisions. So he planted doubt deliberately. He made defenders think instead of react. That's why he looked faster than players who were physically quicker than him. Mentally, he was already 2 plays ahead. Even his footwork reflected genius. Bird mastered balance manipulation years before modern analytics obsessed over spacing and efficiency. Tiny shoulder fakes, subtle hesitations, a half step backward, small movements creating massive consequences. He understood human balance like a scientist. Defenders leaned 1 inch too far, and Bird punished them instantly. The jumper looked awkward, almost mechanical, but it was deadly because the release came exactly when defenders lost equilibrium. He didn't need separation. He only needed hesitation. That was enough. And while fans remembered the scoring, Bird's rebounding and passing were equally terrifying, because they proved his complete control over the game. He anticipated rebounds before shots even missed. He boxed out smarter, not harder. He read trajectories instinctively. Then he'd ignite fast breaks with outlet passes so precise they felt pre-planned. Entire defenses collapsed trying to react. Coaches spent sleepless nights designing schemes to stop him and still failed because Bird adapted instantly. Double team him? He becomes the best passer on the floor. Play him straight up. He scores 40. Get physical? He enjoys it. Trash talk him? He humiliates you publicly. There was no safe strategy.